All right. Hi, everyone. We're live with Lizzie Chapman today. This is the first of our Lean in Bangalore SuperWoman series, so we're very excited to have Lizzie here with us. My name is Hannah. I'm one of the network leaders of Lean in Bangalore, and the format for today's chat, it probably be around 45 minutes or so. We're going to talk to Lizzie about her journey building ZestMoney, balancing work and life, and anything else under the sun. We'd encourage you to ask questions as well, and so we'll be taking questions from the audience towards the end of the chat. Great, so let's get started. Thank you for being here, Lizzie.
Thank you.
Great, so my first question, and I love asking successful women this, is what do you attribute your success to so far? And the answer can't be luck.
No, and I hate people that say that.
Yeah.
Two things, I think. One would be a really awesome mother, I think, and therefore super amazing role models in terms of just strong women, not necessarily successful, but strong, happy, ambitious women in my life.
Right.
Mother being number one for sure. And then probably the second one, which is really boring, but is my fail-safe, hard work. Just really boring, plain hard work.
Right.
Yeah, for years and years and years.
That's great. Love it. Love the mom. I've never heard the mom
Oh, really?
before. Yeah.
Okay.
So we don't give them enough credit.
Yeah.
All right. My next question was about ZestMoney. So it's been what a 4 year?
3.5
year journey. So I'd love to just hear your experience starting it out, building it out, now closing a Series B, and really just massively scaling it up. So what's it been like?
Amazing. Better than ever could have expected. Obviously, it's the most intense thing you'll ever do, as you know. I don't think there's anything harder than startup world, trying to build something, trying to hire, trying to get people to understand your mission, get a product live, cope with all the challenges of scaling, which is the stage you're at now. But no, I don't think I could be doing anything else.
Right.
So we were super lucky. The three founders, me, Priya, Ashish, we all got the opportunity to work together for a few years in our previous company. And so making the decision to do what we did and start up, I guess 4 years ago, wasn't particularly frightening. It felt like the right thing to do. We had a huge amount of alignment and a shared vision for what we wanted to do. And that's probably why it's been a relatively smooth ride until now, because we've got three co-founders who, passionately believe in what we're doing and share almost exactly the same, ideas of what that means, not just in terms of product and strategy, but even the team and the culture that we want to build.
Right.
And in some ways, that's probably the most fun bit. I think, launching a product and getting customer traction there's nothing more exciting. But I actually say to people, you can do that within a company. You don't need to start up to do that. So if there's a company that you respect in an area that you love, join them and get involved, in the business and launch real product and touch customers.
Right.
The best bit of actually starting your own business, in my opinion, is that you get to do all of that plus build your own culture.
Right.
And see people come in and develop thanks to your inputs. And that's the most exciting bit. And I think the bit that makes me the most kind of goosebumpy, apart from when I get to speak to customers, is when I just look around at this team who is so phenomenal right now, and they're working so hard and they're delivering amazing work, and you think, wow, how did we create that?
I can imagine. And I did want to talk about culture as well, because I think it's so important. I think a team is really what builds a company. But before we get into that, wanted to ask, what has kind of been the toughest part so far that you would say about getting to here? Yeah.
It's just like having a baby. You think it's got easier, and then it just gets hard again. Every stage has its own challenges. Obviously, probably the first 1 year, where you're just desperately trying to get a product to market and find product market fit and raise capital, is in some ways the most uncertain and the most frightening. But on the other hand, it's also when you've got the most freedom and you can, make really bold decisions.
Right.
And so the harder bit now, when we're at scale, is that we can't be, as free to experiment and change things, because there's a lot of business now, including, vendors and partners and customers dependent on what we've already built.
Absolutely.
So I think those are the two sides of scale. And then I think the hardest bit always for everybody throughout the whole thing is people again. And maybe that's because we care so much about building a good culture, but the constant challenge of finding people that are not just brilliant and clever and smart, but that understand your mission and care about what you're doing, and then training them, keeping them in, you know, the hyper-competitive world that we're in today.
Yeah. So which one would you say is harder, hiring or fundraising?
It's funny because I didn't actually mention fundraising. I think we've been really lucky on fundraising, actually. I think that compared to... Yeah, lots of that. You're right. I'm going to say that. No, but that fundraising is one where there's a lot of randomness, I would say, a lot of randomness. And if you get kind of a lucky break early on with, like, you know, one kind of brand investor, then the rest of it does get a bit easier. So I think we have had a good ride on fundraising, but it is the most exhausting, time-consuming, frustrating part of the whole process. Right. So it's definitely my least favorite part of everything that you do as a founder. I feel like everything else you do in a startup is a sort of input-output exercise. If you work 12 hours a day, you ship something great, right? It's just very kind of, you can see cause and effect. Right. The problem with fundraising is you might meet 100 investors and spend hours and hours and hours on it and get nothing. Right. And then you meet one and you're done. Right. And I find that really hard to handle.
It is. It's its own set of ups and downs.
Yes,
absolutely. So you mentioned baby. You did that as well as you went through building this other baby.
Yes.
If you're okay to share, can you walk us through like doing that?
How you do the two together.
Yeah.
The hack to have a baby and have a startup. Well, first of all, I'll be very honest and say it wasn't the plan. But back to my mother, a good quote from her that she says all the time is, there is never a right time to have a baby. So I'm now repeating that to lots of women that ask me, and it's true. There really wouldn't have been a right time. So, you know, you could say, oh, you should do it when you're young and you have lots of energy, but then it, you know, might impact your career. You could have said, in my position, I should wait till the company is really stable and then do it. But you never know when that's going to be. There's no perfect time. So in the end, I think a sort of happy surprise is the best way to do it. And then you don't really think about it too much. And I think I'm one of those people that I'm quite an optimist, and I'm quite sure of my own capabilities. And so I just felt immediately that if I was going to commit to doing this, i.e. baby and startup, I would make it work, right? The brilliant thing about a baby is it's probably one of the only things in the world where you can't change your mind once you've started. You can't just say, yeah, I'm not going to do this anymore, right? Which you can with a startup, you can, even with a marriage. I mean, there's hardly anything in the world now you can't walk away from. And this one is one. So you just figure it out. Yeah. And actually, I know I'm going to sound really annoying, and I actually hate women that do this as well, but it hasn't been as hard as I expected. And I think that's because your expectation of it is so bad. You know, you assume that it's going to be just impossible. Right. And actually it hasn't been. It's been a relatively pleasant surprise. Certainly the sort of logistical side of it. I think people underrate the emotional challenges. And that's very different to the practical challenges. But practically, yeah, it's been fine.
Okay. That's great to hear. I think there's a lot of us, the lean-in community, broader, we're just, you know, a few of us are in our 30s and we're just trying to figure out when that right time is. But
I think, but the only other really important piece of advice I talk about a lot is, and the only way I've made it successful is, don't fall for the matriarchal philia that is kind of absorbing the world right now. Being a super mother is not the most important thing, you know, unless that's what you want to do, that's fine. Right. But don't believe that you don't exist as a woman and you don't have validity if you're not the perfect mother. Because once you create this sort of high bar of what is the perfect mother, it's really challenging. And so have a lower expectation for yourself, and then you'll be happier, and I think the kid will be happier.
Right, because we hear about like moms feeling guilty all the time.
Exactly, and that's all self-made, right? So I think, you know, just kind of that's what I meant about the practical side of it is one thing. I think the emotional side is the harder bit, because there's obviously a huge amount of pressure in the world to be this perfect, you know, parent, and and that's, you have to resist.
Yes. You make it sound very easy. Okay, so just moving on to a couple of other questions. This is also another one that I love, and I have mixed feelings about this as well, like being labeled as a woman entrepreneur. What are your feelings about that?
Yeah, and I actually used to be very resistant to that. And you'll notice even until recently, I refused to be in sort of magazine and newspaper articles about women entrepreneurs. I even rejected awards that were for women entrepreneurs, and would refuse panels if they said, we need a woman, can you come? I'd say no, out of spite. Right. And then actually I've realized, maybe even only in the last 1 year, that sure, it is sometimes sort of, it feels almost patronizing. But on the other hand, if we are going to change the massive, still lingering amounts of inequality that we see everywhere, really we have to be more visible. And if I think about what has been, you asked literally the first question, what has been the secret of success? One of the most useful and powerful things for me has been role models, and senior women around me that have inspired and motivated me, because that's, it works, right? And so now I've decided to get more comfort with this whole women entrepreneur thing, and sort of happily take up that label if it means that I am more visible, and therefore maybe there's one or two women out there that might feel, slightly inspired by that. That's the only reason I do it. But I think that this is a constant challenge, that we never want to feel like we got given a sort of special chance, that it wasn't kind of valid just based on the work that we've done. And so I still say, if it's like a panel and they say, oh, we need a woman, diversity, then I say, actually, then I'm not, do you need me or do you need a woman? If you need a woman, then that's not ideal.
That's fair. I've gone back and forth with this, because it does then kind of silo you into that, and I think exactly you as like a woman entrepreneur. But on the flip side, it's the identity, right? Like that's made you what you are so far. And I think, we've got to sort of grab any, there's enough prejudice that you will face as a woman entrepreneur, for sure. There are probably still lots and lots of investors and potential partners that might be judging you, and therefore, if you get one sort of special help on one side, I think you take it. I think you. I agree with that. I guess just building on that a little bit, what has been like a moment where you thought that, okay, if I was a man, this wouldn't have happened? If you can name, if you're okay to share. Probably, I mean, honestly, and I know this also might sound a bit irritating, I just try not to think about it, right? I try not to dwell on it, because I have this sort of weird life philosophy that the energy you give out also attracts energy. And so if you sort of go into the world believing that everybody's against you, then guess what? It is harder. So I really, really, really try not to think about, for example, if we do get a rejection from an investor. In most cases, they've given really valid feedback, and so I haven't had the opportunity to think, oh, it's because we're women. Right. But I would probably say that's the one area where it's still just statistically tougher. And whenever I read the stats and I look at, forget statistics, if I just go to an event, which is, say, I don't know, a VC in Bangalore organizing a fintech event, I walk in and there are still today, 2 or 3 women out of 100 max. And I think those are still the times when you think, oh God, we've still got so much work to do. So probably that, I'd say anything like that, sort of industry events. Although funnily enough, talking about that, I'm actually sometimes more pro-India than other markets on this one. I think financial services in the rest of the world, and obviously I'm specifically talking about financial services and fintech, but in the Western world is actually sometimes even worse than India. So an anecdote I've told a few times recently, but about a year ago, I was in Europe at a conference in Paris, a fintech conference, the biggest fintech conference in Europe. And first of all, I went on stage, I think on the second day, and somebody tweeted, there have been 170 presenters and this is the first woman. And that tweet kind of went viral. And I thought, oh, and I hadn't actually noticed, back to the point that I try not to look for bias. But then suddenly I noticed all around me that it was a
particularly bad sort of gender ratio. And then the funniest thing happened. I was standing by the side of the stage after my talk, and another conference attendee came up and asked me to get him a coffee. So he clearly assumed I was a waitress, which was particularly embarrassing, given that I'd just been on stage. I hadn't made any impression on him. But that kind of stuff is when it really like hits you back in the face, because you realize that there's this, you know, this guy just couldn't believe that I would be there as a CEO, you know. But honest to God, that very, very rarely happens to me in India. And I do think that, obviously, I don't really look like a waitress in India as much. But the other thing is that in financial services, we do have some really, really phenomenal senior leaders and role models. And so I actually find, specific to financial services, not all industries, I don't walk into as many conferences and rooms and feel like the only woman in the room, which is pretty cool.
Okay, that's good. That's great. All right, and then this is my favorite topic, and I'm currently trying to figure this out for my startup. I mean, we're still very small, but how did you build? And I've heard great things about the team you've built, the culture, and the diversity, and all of those things that are, you know, that every, I guess, entrepreneur should be doing, starting very early. So what are some of the things you did to create that culture at ZestMoney? Yes,
well, yes, and this isn't random or luck. This definitely takes a lot of thought and thinking and planning and kind of constant repetition and going back to basics and thinking about what you're trying to do. I think, again, the brilliant thing was, as founders, we had come from a previous company where we'd all worked together. So we had a good sort of roadmap for what we thought good and bad pieces of culture looked like. And one of the first things we did almost on day one was write literally lists of what we loved about the old company we worked for from a culture perspective and what we didn't love. So what would we bring with us and what would we leave behind? And that exercise was so useful, because you also find alignment within your founding team about what matters. There's a few core things that we really felt passionately about. One of them was transparency and authenticity, and they're very linked, actually. We felt that a lot of startups go down a sort of a wrong turn in terms of culture by hyping up their story and even their numbers to a level of sort of almost craziness, which is really, really difficult for a team on the ground when they know that the reality is different to the hype. And we had experienced that in our past. And so it was really important to us to build a really kind of deep layer of like authenticity. What we are going to do is what we say we're going to do, and the customer's going to validate that. We're not going to have some other story for the press or for investors. You know, we wanted to have that real kind of feeling of genuineness. And the best way to do that, again, is extreme transparency. So I think compared to a lot of other startups, we share way more data with our team, information with our team. It actually comes down to another value, I think, of mine and my founders, which is one of trust. And so just by really, really trusting our team and believing in them, we're therefore very comfortable sharing with them the full health of the business, the highs, the lows, the ups and downs. And then I think in return, they trust us because they know that we're not hiding anything. And so it creates quite a good working relationship. And then linked to trust, I'd say, you know, respect. It's also about thinking, look, these people are giving up a lot of their time. They've given up opportunity cost to, you know, help this mission. Let's have a huge amount of respect for them, and vice versa. And definitely, you know, in this kind of first 30 people or whatever, that's really easy. But as you scale, that gets harder and harder, because you can't, you know, control the way a really big team think. So you have to have these guiding principles and kind of behaviors. Like, I think so.
That makes a lot of sense. I think the authenticity is what I see a lot of companies missing. Like, what you say you're doing is not necessarily what you're doing. There was this, just as an aside, I think it was LIB in the US that called this. So they saw this ad for a financial services company that talks about like women who don't relate to their financial advisor or something like that. And they essentially looked at the company and checked how many women that company had. And there was their diversity was terrible. The name of that company was something Brothers, right? Like very, very, you know. And so anyway, they were very transparent with that analysis they did, but I can totally see that. In
Yeah.
this day and age, everything is
exactly, and that's the
open,
other thing
right?
as well, right? You can't hide behind bullshit for long. It gets caught out, right?
Which is,
and I think,
great.
yeah, and some people are good at that, and I think that's also the problem as a founder, and maybe as a woman founder or CEO, is that the role models you see, often the ones that are most public and most featured and most profiled, are going to be the ones most prone to hype and BS or whatever, and so it's very hard to learn to be authentic.
Right.
You almost have to sort of block the noise and just go back to yourself and think, why am I doing this? And then reject that.
Absolutely. Great. So I'm going to move on. So we had a couple of questions pre-submitted by some of our Lean members. So one of them is, again, this is a bit completely different, slightly pivoting our conversation, but what are some of the stereotypes that Indians have busted free in the area of like spending and loans and finance and things like that? What was something that surprised you as you built this out?
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, another thing I think that I'm sort of quite good at is busting stereotypes. I hate stereotypes. I hate that type of bias, and it was hard at first. Coming to India and trying to build things in fintech, even sort of 7-8 years ago when I first started. Because people would tell me, oh, no, this is the way it is, this is the way it is. And the obvious one, especially in our world, was, no, in India, nobody takes loans. This is a savings culture. Lending will never take off. And I just have this theory that's so far been proven right, which is human beings all over the world are more similar than different. We always think there's these nuances to us, but actually we're all implicitly motivated by a lot of the same factors and drivers. And if you actually look for what are the commonalities in humans, in genders, in age groups, you will find more than you will find difference. And so we believe that, like everywhere else in the world, especially people who have lower incomes and are sometimes more marginalized by financial services companies, that they needed to have the right and the access to not necessarily loans, but just products that make life easier and more affordable. And that's all we were trying to prove. So yeah, I think the biggest surprise was that it wasn't just that we were thinking there might be a small market, and there was. There's an even bigger market than we expected for that, because so many people assumed that there isn't a market for what we do. I think the other thing as well is that we underestimated how comfortable people would be in India with digital adoption and how quickly. And that's because things have just moved so quickly in the last 3 years or 5 years. And I don't think we could have expected that type of comfort level, not just in like young millennials, but literally across the board, from all incomes, all locations, all age groups. People are adopting digital and demanding digital experiences quicker and faster, I think, in India than in most of the other countries we operate in. Sadly, though, to the topic of today, more men, but obviously still the ratio is skewed, and that's a challenge we still have today in our business as a lending business, which is that we're more than 70% of our customers are still male. And that's something that is relatively unique to India. In the rest of the world, you would have a slightly more balanced user base, but it reflects the work participation ratios effectively, because women are less likely to have their own income, and therefore it's targeted for them to service lending products, basically, as you know. All right. Next question, which I think we might have briefly touched on, but it'd be good to hear the story of what was that moment when you decided to do this, like to start up, working at a larger company, and then doing just jumping into this. What was that like? So I've never been like particularly scared of doing crazy things. Moving to India on a whim was one example. I also started a hotel randomly about 5 years ago in Mumbai, just because I felt so passionately that nobody was trying to solve the problem I was trying to solve, which was a boutique hotel. And so there you go, that's actually the answer. When you see something in the world that you're so sure is a correct view, and you realize that other people haven't seen it, it gets to a point where you're just so desperate to almost prove the world wrong that you have to do it. And ZestMoney was exactly the same thing. We just kept seeing all these other startups raising money for ideas that were fine, but they weren't obvious. And we knew we had an idea that was definitely going to build a big business.
Right.
And so really, I think the only barrier to starting and actually the decision was made quite quickly, was just our own sort of personal confidence levels in, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to go out there and say we're going to do this. And the fear about things like raising money, especially knowing as two female co-founders that we first started before we brought Ashish in, our third co-founder, we did know that the statistics were against us. And so I think that was probably the biggest kind of hurdle to overcome. And the only way to do that was we just spoke to a lot of other people that had raised money at that time, and we thought,
that's great. Okay, I'm just going to check to see, do we have, if folks are online watching, please add your questions as comments. Otherwise, I think the last question I had is, I know, very cliche, but what advice would you have to our Lean in Bangalore community, and where mix of new moms, slightly older moms, figuring out life and career and work, some entrepreneurs, freelancers, like you name it, right? We have women across the spectrum in terms of age and marital status and whether they have kids or not. But what would be that one advice that you would leave us with?
Probably just a bit linked to actually our discussion on motherhood, but as much as you can, try to stop listening to the noise around you. And I don't just mean, what your family think or what your boss thinks. That's sometimes you can control that, but even the way that media, social media now is so prolific in our lives, just try and block out that noise and focus on what you want from your life as much as possible. And then try and remember that you never regret the things you do. When you look back on life, it's always things you didn't do that you regret. So if there is something that you feel you can do and you can contribute to the world, there's literally no downside in trying, is my feeling. So if there's any budding entrepreneurs out there or anybody that has an idea for a product that doesn't exist, please try it, because you might be right, and if you don't, you will kick yourself.
Okay, that is a great way to wrap this up. Thank you, Lizzie.
Thank you.
I know it's the weekend and probably have a lot going on, but we really appreciate it. And we, at Lean In, we literally, our tagline is empower women, and it's, to your point, there's like, we need role models. We need people who are like us and see them do successful things to be able to, believe that we can get there too. So thank you for being that person and for being here today.
Thank you so much.
Thanks everyone for watching. This video will be, this will be live. Oh, we have a question. All right, great. From Lakshmi. What are the sectors in fintech which women can contribute most?
Oh, wow.
Is it tech, management, or something else?
Everything, absolutely everything. Really passionately believe this. I think that, fintech, anything that's working towards increasing financial inclusion, needs women at every single point of the business, because the most financially, disincluded and unpenetrated people in the world are women always, whether it's lending, whether it's insurance, whether it's wealth management, whether it's savings. And therefore, the only way to design and deliver products that serve those women is to have women within the organization at every level. And I really can't say that enough. The places where it's easiest always to hire women is obviously in customer service, in HR, and in sales and marketing. But that means we have a really big challenge, and there's a bit of a skew in things like technology, product management, and data science. So I would say advice to younger women and daughters is get some exposure to those areas like data science, product technology, because that's where the ratios are the worst. And therefore, as a woman, you can potentially have the most impact because you can really have a differentiated viewpoint. But honestly, there is not a single area of the fintech industry that doesn't need more women.
Right. Sorry, and I have a quick follow-up to that. You've built your team is, you have women at the leadership level and other, how did you do that?
Well, again, it actually wasn't particularly deliberate, not luck, but accident slightly, in that I think we get a lot more applications from women by being women founders. So this is one of the benefits of being or having a diverse founding team, it's very easy then to build a diverse team, right? We're actually very lucky because we just get a much bigger pool to fish in. And I know that, this is a bit controversial, and I'll be very controversial. My husband is a VC, and VCs are famously, the least diverse, especially in India, and good at hiring women. And often they will say in their defense, but we just couldn't find any that didn't come forward. And I find that very difficult to understand, but it is possibly true, because when we're noticing is we get the kind of cream of the crop in terms of applications from women,
right,
because they believe that by working in a diverse team, they'll get a fairer experience, which is kind of a shame, because if it was a male founding team, they actually need more women in the senior team, right? It's almost like the inverse. So we don't have the problem in terms of the pipeline, the applications. And then I think it's just about building, as much as possible, a gender blind process for recruitment, training, etc. And I really do mean gender blind, because the other challenge you can have is, especially if it's women founders and lots of women applying, is you can almost go the other way and create a sort of a misbalance on the too many women side. And so trying to remove any of that bias either way is really, really important. So we just always make sure that the people who are interviewing, for example, are trained in not having implicit bias. I think we all know about that we're all guilty of that in some way, including women. And then we just monitor a lot. So we actually measure statistically a lot what our diversity stats are in every single team, just to make sure that we're not building in biases of our own in some departments and vice versa. So I think you can't really do anything successfully if you don't measure it and monitor it. That's a really important bit people miss out sometimes.
Right.
And then just creating again a culture of meritocracy in the workplace, right? So making sure that everybody has a voice, everybody's has a seat at the table, and that you don't sort of implicitly bring in bias from the outside world into that office, because it's our office. We can decide.
Yeah. No, that's great. And another example of gender blind is just looking at resumes without
exactly. And you can literally do it, right? And you can create, even just the way that we do like interview program, we don't put the names at the top. We have a set of standardized questions. Exactly. So it all comes down to a process. Actually, you're right. Recruitment and training process. Right?
Yeah. Okay, we do have one more question. You said you're not scared of doing crazy things. What techniques did you use to get back up from failure?
If any. Many. And there you go, that's the answer, right? So I think you've answered your own question, which is be comfortable with failure, right? And I think the minute you do have something go wrong and not work out, and you know what, you're fine, then it's easy. So almost get used to, it's also a good sort of startup mantra, which is to be comfortable with failure, experiment frequently. If you're not making mistakes at a big level, then you're not trying hard enough. You're not pushing the boundaries. And I think you should think the same in your personal life as well. I think whenever you're most out of your comfort zone is when you're developing the most. And when you look back on those times, even if they were difficult, you will believe that they were the most additive to your character, right? So I think just being really, really comfortable with failure. And again, it keeps going back to the same point, but just trying not to care so much about what the rest of the world thinks of you. I always think, you're born alone, you die alone. You and how you think about yourself, how you judge yourself is a million times more important than almost anyone around you. And so another way I describe to people is like, you should be thinking about yourself, 100% of the day. You think about other people for a few milliseconds. And guess what? It's the same the other way around. So if you're not going to do something because you're worried what some other person would think about you, that makes no sense, because they're only going to spend, less than 1% of their life thinking about you, whereas you're going to have to live with yourself for the rest of it. So just try and block out, other people.
I actually have a follow-up to that, and I was curious about this, and I've been meaning to ask you this for a while. What does your calendar look like? Because I know you work out, and there's the self-care, that's a big part of it.
Yes.
You are running a company at a very interesting growth stage. You have family, you travel, how does
and friends. And friends. It's so funny, because I was someone sent me an article this week, and I started reading it yesterday, and I actually stopped and deleted it because I hated it. And I've heard this theory many times before, but it was called the 4 burners theory, and I can't remember exactly the 4 burners. I think it was work, family, health, friends, and it said to be good at any one of them, you have to kill one of the others. And I think Randy Zuckerberg said something similar, that you can't have friends, family, and a job, and sleep and exercise. You've got to give up one. I 100% disagree with that theory. 100%. I think that the times I've been most productive in my life and achieved the most are the times when I've been the busiest and I've crammed the most in. And look, it's very personal. I think everybody has their own personal energy level. I really noticed. I think we're all on different kind of frequencies. But if you feel good and your health is good and you have a lot of energy, I strongly believe in packing in more things into your day. I almost think there's some sort of physics behind this, that it takes energy to make energy. So I find that the days that I've worked out in the morning are the days I'm most productive at work. And when I come home that night, I'm the better mother. Whereas if I sort of lay in bed all day, I'd achieve nothing. So I actually really do pack stuff in. Doesn't always go to plan. I'm there's something you say I do this, and this. There's lots of things I don't do. I feel like I've missed my last 3 physio appointments and Hindi classes, but there you go. So prioritization. Right. But yeah, I really do try and sort of put as much as I can into my life. And then maybe the other link to that is being selfish. So saying no to things that aren't going to necessarily help you feel better and feel in control of your life. If it's, constantly doing favors for people and doing things that sort of drain your energy. So not necessarily take up your time, but just drag you down. Right. Try and remove all of those from your life. Be a bit more
Thank you for saying yes to this chat.
No, this is brilliant. This is like super fun, super energizing.
Okay. I think those are all the questions, right?